Hello, buddy. Welcome back to the Tin Man Score channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and today I'm reacting to my second Midnight Terrors video for you guys, and this one's 4 True Scary Neighbor Horror Stories. So without further ado, I'm going to move the camera back up here for you guys, turn the lights off, and let's get this reaction on the road and in the bag. Okay, here we go.
This all happened back in 2018 when I moved into a small two-story house in England with my boyfriend at the time.
Okay.
The neighborhood was one of those quiet little cul-de-sacs where all the houses were packed closely together, facing each other, so there wasn't much privacy. I've always been more of an introvert, so I didn't go out of my way to make friends, but I'd exchange the usual pleasantries with the neighbors when I ran into them.
You see, I wouldn't mind talking to neighbors, but I don't want to be living in no cul-de-sac like this person's describing and living in a townhouse that's like close together on another person's property. If I ever move out of my mom and dad's house, that is not for me. I'd rather have more open land.
Nothing more than a casual good morning or a polite nod here and there. One of those neighbors was Greg, an older guy who lived directly across from us. From the start, he was overly friendly, one of those people who'd stop you for a chat that would drag on way too long, forcing you to come up with some excuse to escape. At first, I figured he was just a lonely guy who liked to talk, and while he could be annoying, he didn't seem weird exactly. He'd share stories about the neighborhood, make notes of people's birthdays, and even invited my boyfriend and me to a garden party he was hosting. I wasn't too keen on going, but I appreciated the gesture. His house was directly across from mine, and I couldn't help but notice how our windows lined up perfectly.
Hey, if a neighbor invites you to go to a party, you should not pass that up. Because if you don't, then that neighbor will probably think you're just rude. But yeah, that's kind of coincidental that his window would be perfectly positioned to face your window. Oh man, I hope he ain't staring into her window to look at her. That would be disturbing and creepy altogether. I don't want to jump ahead into any conclusions. Let's see what happens next.
If I left my blinds open, I had a clear view into his house, and he had a clear view into mine. A couple of years passed, and during that time, my boyfriend and I split up. I never actually told my neighbors about it, but it was probably obvious when his car disappeared from the driveway for good. He moved out of the country, though we stayed friends and kept in touch. Living alone felt strange at first, so I decided to adopt a cat to keep me company. He became my little shadow, always following me around the house. Around this time, Greg started becoming more of a nuisance. Anytime I left or returned home, he'd find an excuse to flag me down and start a conversation. It got old fast, but I'd humor him for a few minutes before finding a way to escape. I'd joke about these weird interactions with my ex, telling him about all the times Greg would randomly stop me for long-winded conversations. One time, Greg knocked on my door to drop off 2 parcels that had been left at his place by mistake, one of which was a large table he said he'd go back and grab later. I happened to be in the middle of a raid in Elder Scrolls Online at the time, doing a deathless speed run for an achievement, so I was on a time crunch. I quickly told him to just leave the parcel by the door, and that I'd keep it unlocked so he could drop the other one off when he got it.
Very suspicious indeed. It's kind of convenient that he keeps getting some of her packages by mistake. Or is he just saying that just so he can find a way to make her leave the door unlocked and he walk right on in to steal something? You just never know.
I went back to my desk, put my headset on, and focused on the game. A few minutes later, I heard my front door open, followed by the sound of something being set down. Then, footsteps. I turned around and there was Greg, standing behind me, just watching me play. I didn't want to mess up my run, so I stayed focused on the game, but I could feel him standing there. It was unsettling. When we finally beat the boss, I took off my headset, and Greg's face lit up like he'd just watched the most exciting thing in the world. He kept going on about how incredible it was to watch me play, and how he'd never seen anyone use a keyboard like that before. He practically begged me to teach him how to play. rambling on and on while swaying slightly. I could tell he'd been drinking. I laughed it off and gave him a vague answer, hoping he'd take the hint. But he didn't. He just kept standing there, completely ignoring my subtle attempts to get him to leave. Eventually, I stood up, walked over to the door, and opened it, making it very clear that the conversation was over. He hesitated for a moment, looking a little disappointed, but finally left. That should have been my first real warning sign. Now in the UK, everyone has their own individual outdoor bins for trash, which we have to roll out to the street for collection and bring back in afterward. I started noticing that my bins were always being brought back in, before I even had the chance to do it myself. I figured maybe I was blocking someone's car, and a neighbor was just being helpful. But then I realized that someone had also been using my bins. One day, Greg stopped me for another one of his impromptu chats, and I casually mentioned that someone had been putting their trash in my bin. He acted surprised and said the same thing had been happening to him. Something about the way he said it didn't sit right with me, so I decided to set up a little experiment. I taped an old phone with a surveillance app to my window, pointing it at the bins, just to see who was doing it. And, big surprise, it was Greg.
I knew it. I was just thinking that if he said that somebody was doing the same thing with his, he's probably covering up the fact that he was doing it. But nope. He didn't know that she was going to set up a trap camera, and now he's busted.
Instead of confronting him, I let it go, assuming he was just struggling with the new bi-weekly trash collection schedule. But something about it still bugged me. Then Christmas rolled around, and things took an even stranger turn. One night I heard a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I didn't have a peephole, so I just opened it without thinking. And there was Greg, standing there with a red gift bag in his hands. I immediately smelled alcohol on him. Before I could even say anything, he held the bag out and said he had a Christmas present for me. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "I really want to give you a kiss on the cheek, but I can't, not with this pandemic going around." Before I could even react, he ignored his own words and kissed me on the cheek anyway. I was so caught off guard that I just stood there for a second, trying to process what had just happened. He kept talking, dragging out the conversation, and I had to firmly tell him that I was busy and needed to go. Finally, he left. When I opened the gift later, I felt even more unsettled. Inside the bag were 2 bottles of Belgian beer, a half-eaten can of sour cream and onion Pringles, and a small plastic bag of chocolates. I immediately recognized the chocolates. They had been given out by a neighbor with young kids, who had made little holiday treat bags for everyone in the cul-de-sac. Greg had literally re-gifted them to me, and he hadn't even removed the handwritten note from the original givers. After that, I decided I was done being polite. Not long into the new year, I ordered some food delivery. Just a few minutes after it arrived, there was a knock at my door. I knew it wasn't the driver. He had already left. So I immediately got a bad feeling. And then it clicked. Greg always showed up right after I got deliveries. He was watching my house. I ignored the knock and went upstairs, out of sight. That night he came back and knocked again. Once again, I ignored it. The next day I contacted the police and filed a harassment report. I wasn't sure if I was overreacting, but I just wanted something on record in case things escalated. A few days later, Greg knocked again, acting all concerned, saying he was worried about me. That's when I finally told him directly, "I think it's best if we don't have any contact going forward." His response chilled me. "I just wanted to be your friend." A year passed without incident. Then one night, I saw a shadowy figure lurking near my driveway. My instincts screamed at me to go back inside. A few months later, Greg was crouched outside my kitchen window, watching me. I screamed at him, and he just stood up and casually asked, "Are you all right?" I called the police immediately. Turns out Greg had a history of stalking women. They arrested him, but all he got was a caution. He wasn't allowed near my house anymore, and thankfully that was the last time I ever had to deal with him. I moved far away, and I never want to see him again.
A history of being a stalker. That should have been obvious right away. But the fact that he was giving her candies that had other people's name on it that was given to him and trying to win her over, but she ain't buying it, pal. But thank God he got arrested, but I can't believe they let him go. But I'm glad she did the right thing and just decided to move out of that neighborhood.
I live in a tiny town, the kind where everyone knows everyone, and word travels fast. If someone so much as sneezes too loud at the grocery store, the whole town hears about it by dinner. So in October of 2013, when people started whispering about a new guy moving in next door, I paid attention. The biggest piece of gossip? He had just gotten out of prison for a sex crime and would be registering as a sex offender. As a single woman living alone, and with some very personal past traumas, that news put me on edge.
Hey, that'll put me on edge too, because I'd be mad if we had a registered sex offender move in our neighborhood, because they can act all sweet they want to, but if you know their dark past, you don't want to be around them, that's for sure.
But aside from the town rumors, no one really knew much about him, so I told myself I'd keep an open mind. At first, I was actually one of the few people defending him. I kept saying, hey, we don't even know what he did. People can end up on that list for dumb things like public urination. But the reality is, they don't usually go to prison for that. Still, I wanted to be fair, so I avoided making any judgments before meeting him. Now let me paint a quick picture of my apartment layout, so you understand how things played out. My main entrance is a hidden side door, tucked away by some bushes. My driveway is right next to it, and my neighbor's house sits directly beside mine. His front door basically faces my entrance, so if I wasn't careful, I'd end up running into him every time I came or went. And trust me, I went out of my way to avoid that for weeks. I'd creep around my own apartment just to keep from meeting him, even though I was still telling people to give him a chance. Then, one morning, I was heading to my car for work when, bam, he suddenly popped out from behind the bushes. It startled me so badly that I just froze for a second. But he introduced himself, so I did the same, trying to keep things polite. He offered to trim the bushes between our places, which was such a weird thing to bring up that I didn't know whether to laugh or be creeped out. I just shrugged it off and told him I wasn't sure what my landlords wanted to do with them. Then, at some point, the truth about his past came out. He had been in prison for attempted rape, along with a bunch of assault and battery charges. The story went like this. He was out at a bar with friends. There was a group of women also drinking there, and one of them started feeling sick. She went to lie down in her friend's car outside. He followed her. You can guess where it went from there. That was all I needed to hear. I stopped making excuses for him after that. Now keep in mind, our little town is right in the middle of a school district. There's an elementary, middle, and high school just up the road. A lot of parents were furious that he was living here, but since his crime wasn't against a minor, there weren't any legal restrictions stopping him. His parents moved in with him at first, and I got the distinct feeling that they were just trying to settle him in before ditching him on the rest of us. And that's exactly what they did. In early November, I got into a car accident. Not a major one, but enough to shake me up. That afternoon, while I was at home recovering, my neighbor walked into my workplace and started asking my boss all kinds of weird questions about me. First, he wanted to confirm that I worked there, which was weird because I walked to work all the time. He had to have known. Then he started referring to me in this possessive way that creeped my boss out. My neighbor. I met her. Mine. Me. Mine. My. She told me later that his eyes were darting all over the place like he was casing the store.
First off, if the parents moved in with him, I would have been all right because they were trying to keep him straight. But if they just ditched him like that, I'll be furious too. Because without them there, he could probably start all over what he did before. And the fact that he had the nerve to walk into her workplace after she got into an accident just to see if she works there, it's creepy and sickening. and him saying me tells me that he's either drunk or high on something. That's alarming.
And she got a terrible feeling from the whole encounter. Then he mentioned that he had to bring me a care package. Let me tell you, that was the last thing I wanted. Thankfully, the care package never came, but that didn't stop the weirdness. A few days later, he walked into my workplace again, this time ordering breakfast. He acted completely casual, then looked me dead in the eye and said, "Oh, I didn't know you worked here." At that point, I knew for sure. This guy was watching me. Then, right before Thanksgiving, his parents left. They just packed up and left him there alone, the day before the holiday. While I wasn't exactly a fan of the guy, even I had to admit that was pretty messed up. But their departure set off a chain reaction of even more unsettling behavior. Before, he had already been watching me a little, but after they left, it became constant. If I left for work in the morning, he was at his front door watching. If I left in the afternoon, there he was, standing outside, waving. If I came home at night in the pitch dark, yep, he was still there, lurking. It was relentless. Then came the candy incident. On Thanksgiving Day, he went around to every single house where a woman lived alone and left 3-pound bags of M&Ms as a gift. I didn't answer my door, but that didn't stop him. He went upstairs to my landlord's entrance, introduced himself, and asked her to make sure I got my candy. At that point, I had enough. I talked to a female police officer, the only female officer in our tiny town, and she advised me to start logging everything. The police also agreed to do nightly checks near my place during their rounds. My landlord even cleared a space for me in a different garage so I could park somewhere less visible. That way, I wouldn't have to walk past his house just to get to my door. Things started calming down a little, but I still felt uneasy. Someone even got me a can of pepper spray, and, don't laugh, I also had a samurai sword. Was it overkill? Maybe.
Hey, no, a samurai sword, that would definitely protect you against some weirdo like that. And also pepper spray will blind him, so that is definitely an overkill option, but hey, if he threatens you, it will work.
Did it make me feel safer? Absolutely. But deep down, I was still scared, especially when I found out that on top of everything else, he had military training. Then one night, one of my coworkers spotted him just sitting outside our workplace long after closing time. He wasn't doing anything, just sitting there. And when he noticed that someone was watching him, he tried to slip away into the darkness like it was no big deal. I'm just relieved that I see him less these days. Since I started parking in the garage, I've managed to avoid him more. But every now and then, he still comes into my work, buying the most random things and lingering just long enough to make people uncomfortable. My boss has a rule now. Whenever he shows up, I go hide in the back. And the worst part, he knows I do it. Because now, he just stalls and waits to see if I'll come out. I don't know what his deal is. Maybe he truly doesn't get why no one in town wants him around. But I do. And as long as he's still here, I'll be watching him just as closely as he watches me.
I mean, he should take the hint because he's acting like this, stalking her, even at a workplace. That ain't right. I don't know why he picked that town to begin with to live there. And if he was known for raping women, oh man, he should have been in prison a lot longer than the sentence they gave him. He shouldn't be on the streets, period. But if he slips up, he's either going back to jail or he's got to pack up and move. Clear and simple.
My boyfriend and I were just hanging out in the living room, watching a movie, enjoying a quiet night. I was 8 months pregnant at the time, and my kids, 5 and 7 years old, were sound asleep down the hall. Everything felt totally normal until we heard a knock at the door. When my boyfriend peeked out the window, we saw it was Roger. Now, Roger was this older guy, probably in his 50s or 60s, who lived alone. We'd met him a few months earlier and even helped him with some flooring in his kitchen. He always seemed nice enough, just kind of a quirky, chatty guy. He once casually mentioned that he was a dealer and had pounds of weed in his car. We laughed it off, like, okay, Roger, you do you. Never got any weird vibes from him.
Shouldn't have not mentioned that he's a weed dealer, because you never know who he'll have come around asking for that stuff. And them laughing about it, oh man, they should be taking it more seriously, because it ain't funny.
Until that night. So we open the door, not thinking much of it. But the second it swings open, Roger steps inside. No hesitation. Right away, I could tell something was off. He wasn't his usual friendly self. He looked agitated, like he was barely keeping it together. As he moved toward the kitchen table, I caught a glimpse under his sweatshirt, and my blood ran cold. He had a massive hunting knife tucked in his waistband, and a baseball bat. I didn't say anything right away. I just froze, trying to process what I was seeing. My boyfriend had no clue. He sat across from Roger at the table, asking if he was okay, if he needed help with something. And that's when Roger lost it. He started yelling about how the people at my house aren't happy with you, and ranting about the flooring we had helped him with. He kept saying my boyfriend needed to come with him right now to fix it, or these mysterious people would be angry. At one point, he even brought up my kids, which sent me into full panic mode. I told him they were sleeping, and he needed to leave. There was no way my boyfriend was going anywhere with him. Things escalated fast. My boyfriend could tell Roger was getting aggressive, even though he still didn't know about the weapons. Trying to keep things calm, he quickly stood up and said, "All right, man, let's go check it out." The plan was simple. Get Roger out the door and lock it behind him. It almost worked. They made it to the door, and my boyfriend turned to look at me for just a second. And in that moment, Roger shoved him, hard. My boyfriend stumbled into the doorway, and before he could react, Roger slammed the door shut, trapping me inside alone. I immediately grabbed my phone and called 911. While I was trying to explain what was happening, the operator told me to go outside. I hesitated. Roger had a knife. What was I supposed to do? Just wander around in the dark while a lunatic was threatening my boyfriend?
Something ain't right here. This Roger fella might be on some messed up weed himself. And when she calls 911, the operator says you have to go outside. I'll be yelling over the phone, "Operator, she's pregnant. Just send the police, please." That's all you got to do.
But the operator insisted, so I stepped out onto the deck, and they were gone. It was eerily quiet, like they had just vanished. It hadn't even been a full minute. I just stood there, heart pounding, completely helpless. Then out of nowhere, there was this wild pounding on the door. I ran to open it, and my boyfriend flew inside, eyes wide, looking like he had just escaped a horror movie. And in his hands, a mystery axe. Even the 911 operator was like, "Wait, what is going on?" Apparently, the second they got to the street, Roger pulled out the knife and started screaming that he was going to cut your head off for the people at my house. My boyfriend didn't hesitate. He bolted, sprinting through backyards, hopping fences, doing whatever he could to lose Roger. At some point, he grabbed an axe from someone's yard because, well, what else was he supposed to do? The cops finally showed up. We ended up having a court date, but it was a joke. We just sat outside the courtroom until someone came out and told us it was over. Roger was there, wearing some oversized suit like a kid playing dress-up. No one told us if he was actually arrested or what happened next. All we knew was that he was back home the next day, still living in the same cul-de-sac. My kids had to wait for the bus at the same spot where he walked by every morning. We moved.
I cannot believe with their testimony they could not go inside of the courtroom and made sure that he gets put away. But nope. It's just sickening that the daggum court system wouldn't put him away. Then they wouldn't have to move. Man, that just makes me so mad.
A few years ago, I moved to the UK for university. It was a dream of mine to study there. Plus, I really needed to get away from my family. Things at home had just become way too toxic. My first year was great. I made amazing friends, met my boyfriend, who I'm still with, and just enjoyed my new independence. By second year, a few friends and I decided to rent a house through student accommodations. It was nice having more freedom compared to the first year dorms, especially when it came to noise and parties. My room was on the ground floor, and my window opened into a small backyard. I'd go out there every day to smoke since I'm a smoker. The backyard had this thin wooden door that led to a back alley where we kept our bins. The door was old and only locked from the inside, so we had to tie it shut with string to keep it from swinging open. Now, our neighbors were interesting. On one side, we had families and other student houses, but on the right side, there was a house of 5 guys who didn't look like students at all. Something about them was off. The first time I actually spoke to one of them was during a police intervention. One of his flatmates had gone off the rails, attacking everyone with a kitchen knife and setting fire to their kitchen. My flatmates and I had gone outside after hearing the commotion, and we saw this guy standing there, covered in blood, with deep cuts on his arms and a wound on his head. We didn't know what to do, so we helped him clean up, gave him an old t-shirt, and just tried to be good people. The police took the attacker away, but we never got any details about what happened. The guy we helped? Yeah, he was weird. While we were patching him up, he kept flirting with me and trying to grab me, which was super uncomfortable. It was also clear he was high. His room reeked of weed. At the time, we brushed it off, thinking he was just shaken up from the attack. But looking back, that should have been the first red flag. For a while after that, I'd see him around campus, but I never spoke to him again. Then one day, I was heading to the corner shop when he suddenly approached me. His whole vibe felt off, his body language, the way he spoke, just everything. I didn't want to engage, so I kept my responses short. That's when he suddenly said, "Oh, that's okay. I'll just wait in front of your house and we can talk later." I laughed it off, thinking he was joking, but when I walked back home, I froze. There he was, sitting on my doorstep with one of his flatmates, just waiting for me. I panicked and turned around, walking straight back to the shop. I called my only male flatmate, begging him to come home and tell them to leave. Of course, he wasn't home. No one was. So I just had to wait them out. I literally sat there for an hour before they finally left. As soon as they were gone, I sprinted back home and locked the door behind me. Our front door had a glass panel, which made it even worse because you could kind of see through it. I kept thinking, what if they come back? What if they don't leave next time? After that, I made every effort to avoid them. It mostly worked, until one night. I was outside in the backyard having a smoke when I noticed something weird. The wooden door, the one we always kept tied shut, was open. The string had been cut. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I figured one of my flatmates had taken the bins out and forgotten to tie it back, so I just closed it and tied it again. That was mistake number 2. Now, these neighbors were constantly fighting and screaming at all hours of the night. At first, it freaked us out, but eventually we got used to it. But on this particular night, my boyfriend was staying over. He's the deepest sleeper I know. Seriously, nothing wakes him up. But in the middle of the night, he shot up in bed. He swore he heard something. I was still half asleep when he shook me awake. We just sat there, completely silent, listening. Then, out of nowhere, bang! The wooden backyard door slammed open. We froze. Then came the footsteps. Someone was in the backyard, right outside my window. The worst part? My window was open. We could hear whispering, and then the back door handle started moving. Someone was testing the lock. We held our breath. The curtains were closed, so they couldn't see us, but we knew they were out there. Then we heard something even worse, my window shifting. Someone was trying to open it even more. Then, in a language we didn't understand, one of them said something, and we heard them start climbing in. That was it. We jumped out of bed, grabbed whatever we could, and bolted out of the room. I snatched my phone and called my flatmates, telling them to lock their doors. Then we ran straight out of the house and down the street while I called the police. Thank God the station was just a few streets away because they got there in under 5 minutes. By then, the guys were gone. The police caught one of them, but the other had taken off and was found later, just a few streets away, casually smoking weed like nothing had happened. When the police searched their house, they found meth, heroin, and, get this, one of them had been carrying a massive kitchen knife the entire time. I had no idea why they targeted me. I'd never done anything to them, never caused any problems. The thought that they were trying to break into my room with a weapon was something I just couldn't shake. One of them ended up getting sentenced to 2 years in prison for carrying a weapon with intent to harm. But after that night, I was done. I moved back home a few months later. I just couldn't handle living there anymore. Even now, I still struggle with it. I wake up at the smallest noises, and the nightmares are awful. But at least I still have my boyfriend, and we talk about it a lot, which helps. Some things just take time to heal.
Yeah, that is terrifying. Imagine you just living peacefully in your flat or home, and all of a sudden your neighbor just so happens to be high on marijuana and doing meth. I'll be scared to live around them. And then also the fact that two of them was trying to get inside of her house with a big kitchen knife. That's like automatic. I'm pressing charges on them. But they only give one guy 2 years. But I'll be doing like she did with her boyfriend, just pack the stuff up and move. Because I'll be fearing for my safety too. So I understand why they left. But anyway, that's going to be it for now. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications for more Midnight Terrors reactions. This has been another successful installment of the Tin Man's Quarter channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and I said that's a wrap, and that's Dale.